John 10, 1 through 13. I tell you the truth, the man who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in some other way, is a thief and a robber. The man who enters the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The watchman opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen for his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but they did not understand what he was telling them. Therefore Jesus said again, I tell you the truth, I am the gate for the sheep. All who ever came before me were thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. He will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and to kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd who owns the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep.
Somebody breaks into somebody's house and they go into the panic room. These are upper-end houses. Let's just say that the cost of building one of those panic rooms would be way more than my house is worth. But they've got steel and concrete reinforced walls. They have a steel door that keeps everybody out. There's a separate air source, and there's food in there and water in there to survive for quite a long time. Well, Brenda and I experienced another kind of panic room back when I was in college, because I preached for a little church in New Site, Mississippi, a very, very small, microscopic rural community in northeast Mississippi. And the folks there had panic rooms, but they called them storm cellars. And because of the terrain and the weather patterns, this area of Mississippi was Tornado Alley. And so there were two things we learned when we would go over there on Sundays. Number one, don't walk in the high grass because it's snaky. And I think you know what that means. And we're not talking about garter snakes. We're talking about the ones that go tss before they bite you. And if the sky gets to look a certain way, run to a storm shelter. And so folks, almost everybody in that community had dug a hole in the ground, and sometimes it was just pretty primitive, but very often they would put walls down in there, and they would store their canned goods as well, and some of their vegetables, because it was cool. But it was secure, and if a tornado came through, you went down there and you were safe from it. The truth of it is, the world is a dangerous place in so many ways. And so you might say that we all need a panic room. Now, don't go home and start digging a big hole in your backyard. But where do you go for safety? For emotional protection, for protection from the evil in the world. When Jesus describes himself, it sounds exactly like what we need. Now, Dave began this section of John chapter 10. where Jesus is talking about himself as a good shepherd. When he first starts talking, he uses this metaphor about a shepherd and sheep, and it says the disciples didn't know what he was talking about. Do you pick that up? Many times, Jesus would begin his teaching by telling a story, and his disciples are saying, what's he talking about now? And at one time in Matthew chapter 13, he said, why do you always talk to us in parables? They were saying, can't you just say what you want to say? And so Jesus answers their question, it's because you're too dull of thinking to understand, or your hearts are too hard. And so this is why I teach in parables, so that those whose hearts are open will be illuminated, and those who are just too stubborn and too selfish are not going to get a clue. But I think what he says here in John 10 is one that we can grasp. And so it says Jesus again said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. This makes me ask some questions. What does he mean by door? Now, the New International Version that I usually use uses the word gate. I believe the King James and some of the older versions use door. Now, the ESV, English Standard Version, has gone back to using door. And what does he mean by all who came before me? And how do you enter that door to be safe? And what does it mean? Exactly what does it mean to have life and have it abundantly? Once again, one of the other translations say to have life and have it to the full. We're going to pursue some of these things. You see, back in those times, and still in small rural communities, villages in this part of the world, raising sheep is a communal event as well as involving individual entrepreneurs. So during the day, the shepherd would have a certain number of sheep, sometimes 100, sometimes less than that. And he would lead the sheep out to pastures so that they could graze on rich, nutritious grass. And he would take them to places where the water was safe and so they could drink. Generally speaking, he would not be too far away, so at night he would bring them back to the village. And there was one large sheep pen in the village, and he would herd the sheep into there, along with the sheep of all the other shepherds from that village. And they would hire a trustworthy guard, a watchman, who was the only one that had the key to the gate. And in the morning, the shepherd would come back, and you've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sheep in there. And how do you pick your sheep out? Do you put a red stripe on the back of your sheep so you can identify them all? No. You call them. And the sheep that are yours come out because they recognize your voice. You see, they have learned to trust you. They've been out in the fields grazing with you protecting them, and they have developed, if not an affection, I don't know if sheep have affection, but they've developed a confidence to know because they've seen you scare off the wolves or even fight the lions in order to protect them. And in the rare occasion that your shepherd had to take you really far away and had to stay a night away from everything, he would make a surround out of thorns and rocks and stuff, and he would actually lay in the opening so that any animal that went in would have to go over him. And so the sheep would gain a confidence in him. So when he called them, they recognized his voice and came to him. And so you're starting to see why Jesus was using this as an illustration. Jesus describes himself as the good shepherd, the virtuous shepherd, the trustworthy shepherd. The word means somebody with noble, honorable character. Even beautiful, it means. The good shepherd. The kind of shepherd that every sheep wants to have. Honestly, the kind of friend that every human wants to have. You need someone that you can count on no matter what. That you can count on even when everyone else abandons you. And Jesus said, I'm that good shepherd. That's what he's saying to his disciples and to others who hear it and to us, because you see, the Holy Spirit recorded his words forever, so we can have them today in 2021, in a time when the world is dangerous, maybe more dangerous than it's been in a long time. Jesus had known his sheep, has known his sheep since before they were born. He's known us that long. He's the creator of his sheep. He's invested in them. He's not a hireling. He's not someone who was hired to care for the sheep, and when the pressure and the danger come, they run. That's the way it works, isn't it? You want somebody who's got an investment, who's a stakeholder in your life. Somebody that will be hurt if you're hurt, and you know that they're going to fight for you. And Jesus said, I'm the one. Not every leader is noble or good. Before Jesus, a bunch of imposters came. You know, for generations, the Jews have been waiting for Messiah. And so there were exploiters that would rise up. Charismatic leaders that had a good line. And they would rise up and say, I am the promised one, the chosen one. I've come to deliver you from whatever it was, from Roman enslavement, from whatever. And a lot of people would say, oh, we've been waiting for you. And they would come to him. And that happens today in the religious world, doesn't it? Brenda and I were supposed to be going to Guyana in 2020, of October 2020. We were supposed to be going to Guyana, South America, in October of 2021, but both times we've had to cancel that mission because of COVID-19. But you know what Guyana is famous for, don't you? Let's just say if you go to visit Guyana, don't ask for Kool-Aid. It's really nothing to laugh about, but an influential, likable, charismatic, and I'm not talking about as far as gifts of the Holy Spirit, but a personal charisma. A fellow named Jim Jones, gathered a following in the U.S., and he attracted a lot of people. He attracted a lot of seniors, and he convinced them to give him their Social Security checks, and that he would take care of them and provide for them. And he gained quite a following as a religious cult. And he persuaded them all to move to South America, where he had a piece of land, and they developed a compound down there. And this perverted and twisted and evil man convinced them all to have a mass suicide. Now, that's an extreme example, isn't it? But there are people who gather people to follow them for their benefit, not the people's benefit. It doesn't go to that extreme, but it's not good. And this has been happening all along. And Jesus said, before me, there came some deceivers, some thieves and robbers. You know that word thief? In the Greek is the word klepto. Sound familiar? Yeah. See, a thief is a taker, not a giver. Is always wanting to take something from you. Everyone has something to sell or some belief system to promote or a philosophy to sell. Some contain even a little grain of truth because they're more attractive, they're more palatable. But none are like the Good Shepherd who lays his life down for the sheep. Only one leader has the right to ask us for complete loyalty. Only one. And it's the one who has proven that he has nothing to take from us and everything to give. He said, I'm the Good Shepherd. Some of the thieves and robbers are downright evil. They want to harm and destroy you. Jesus will not do that. In fact, he fights against them. He calls himself the door. And the word in the original language is interesting. It means the way in, the entrance, the ingress. But it also means the way out. And so the door that Jesus is, he allows freedom. He said, I'm the door. He uses this term other places. Remember what he said in John chapter 14 when Thomas said, Lord, you say you're going to prepare a place for us, so we don't know the way to get there. Give us a map. Can you give us some GPS coordinates? And Jesus answers his question. He said, Thomas. He said, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. As I was reading about this, I came upon a quotation from an ancient Christian teacher named Thomas à Kempis. You may have heard of him. His stuff is worth reading. It really is. He says it in such a lovely way. He says, without the way, there is no going. Without the truth, there is no knowing. Without the life, there is no living. Jesus is the way, the pathway, the road to life, the road to God. He's the only road. He's the truth. Truth means not lying. It means not false, but it also means real. Jesus is the real reality. People are wondering, in the age of fake news and people telling only part of the truth because it will benefit them, what is real? And the question is, who is real? And Jesus is genuine, real. And actually, without knowing him and being saturated with who he is and what he's about, it's very hard for us to understand what is actually true in the rest of life. We need a standard so that we're always comparing everything else by that standard. Do you ever get to the point where you're so skeptical that you don't really believe anybody or trust anybody? You know that I'm a kidder. I don't call it lying, just, pulling your leg. I must admit that there have been times where Brenda came to a point where she didn't believe anything I said. This started very early on while we were dating. I had a van, it was my dad's van, had grooves in the roof. I think they built it that way to give it structural, strength. She said, why does it have those grooves? And I said, it's because if the thing flips upside down in the snow, it'll go straight down the hill. Early on, she would believe some of my tall tales. And I had a lot of fun with that. And then very quickly, she started not believing, because I came home from work one day. after having been at this plant in Conneaut for 2 years, and I was home early. She said, "Why are you home so early?" I said, "Because I got laid off." She said, "No, you didn't. You're just pulling my leg." I had to have her call one of my fellow workers' wives to say, "Yeah, because Sam got laid off today too. Tim got laid off, Brenda. You can believe him this time." So I guess that should be a lesson to husbands maybe, but... And even though Jesus uses satire and sarcasm even, and irony in his teachings, somehow we know we can always believe him, don't we? He doesn't pull our leg for his own enjoyment or entertainment. And he doesn't deceive us in order to cover up who he really is. We can trust him without reservation. It's hard to trust somebody without reservation. There's always a little bit of caution in us. But not Jesus. Without reservation. He laid down his life for us, for the sheep. Jesus invites us into that safe place, to come into the door, which he is. He says, "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly." After studying this and meditating on this, I came to the conclusion that we should consider any kind of a life without Jesus as following the thief who only wants to kill and destroy us. Now, we might have convinced that we've worked out a perfect life and we've got a better life without being shackled by religion. But the reality is we're following the thief. And the thief will play you along for a long time as the scam develops. And then the hammer falls and you realize you've been robbed of everything. But Jesus came to give us life, he says. To do that, he had to lay his life down for the sheep. You know how that works. We've talked many times about the idea of atonement, that he was our substitute. He paid the price, all those different ways of saying it. That he redeemed us. He purchased the cost of our sins that caused us to be wandering and drifting and away from God, that caused a barrier, and he redeemed us. It's like you're cleaning out some things at home and okay ladies, I'll go on your end this time, and you tell your husband, take these things to the Goodwill, and he takes them to the Goodwill, and then you're looking and you say, wait a minute, I have this priceless goblet that was my great-great-grandmother's that I could never replace, and oh no! And so you jump in the car and you go to Goodwill, and there it is sitting on the shelf. And you run and grab it, and you eagerly pay for it to redeem it, right? Has that ever happened? Oh, it's happened. I remember several years ago, a lady donated some clothing. Among the clothing was a $300 pair of camo coveralls that her husband used hunting. When hunting season came along, he said, honey, what happened to my coveralls? She thought, oops. So she quickly called Ona, and she said, is it still that? Ona said, no, somebody grabbed that right away. Yeah, I guess so. Somebody knew what that was. It was long gone. We couldn't track the person down. It was gone. But Jesus, life gets complicated, doesn't it? And so we get all scrambled up, and sometimes we go this way and that way, and we wander in the wilderness, and we say, how did I get here, and how do I get back? And then Jesus comes, he finds us, he buys us back, and brings us back in to the safe place so he can give us life. And he says it this way. He says, I came that they may have life. He doesn't end it there. And that they may have life abundantly. Now that's, once again, different words. NIV says, and have it to the full, which says it also, but not the same as abundantly. It's interesting, this phrase, it carries the idea that more than enough, to excess. And Jesus says, I came that they might have life and have it to the excess. You know, this is like when you used to go visit your grandmother, and she'd say, are you hungry? And you'd say, well, not terrible. Oh, sit down, let me give you some food. And she starts piling the food on the plate. Piling the food on the plate. And you say, that's enough, Grandma. Oh, no, you're a little skinny. You need a little bit more. You know, every grandmother's job is to fatten up their grandchildren. They figure that they're failing if they don't make them plump. Well, that's what he's saying. I came that you will not just have life, but you will have an excess of life. Now, does that just mean that you're going to live longer? Some people say, you know, Prince Philip died this week. He was 99 years old. Can you imagine that? 99. I've heard some people say when they heard about that, I don't want to live that long. I'm not going to say that. I don't expect to. But that's not what he's talking about here. There are people who died at 50 and 40 even, who were given by Jesus an excess of life. And it's not just talking about the fact that when we die, we get to continue living in eternity. It's not just talking about that. It's talking about quality of life. Because you see, especially, pursue this in John sometime. Maybe we will in some studies or sermons. Very often, usually when Jesus talks about life, he's talking about the eternal life that begins in the here and now. It's the life of God that comes into us when we are born of water and the Spirit, when we are born anew. And the fruit of it is what we're living now to develop. Now, there are times when we don't feel that excess of life. We get a little discouraged or distracted or off the course or whatever. But he wants us to discover and explore and open the treasure box and pull out the beautiful, beautiful result of that abundant life. A sense of peace and joy that goes beyond anything that goes wrong. A sense of inner confidence in God's sovereignty and ultimate control that can cause somebody who lives in China and has the government breathing down their neck now as they worship God live with abundant life and without fear and perfectly willing to go to jail for their faith, knowing that not only will God take care of them, but that he has something so far better for them. They don't live in dread of something worse happening. They live in anticipation. And maybe in our own country, there's some things happening right now that not only are we not happy about, frankly, if I'm not happy about a policy, so what? My happiness is not that important. But some of us have deep concerns about the direction our country is going, about some laws that are in the cusp of passing that will have direct effect on churches. And if we allow that cloud of dread to hang over us and we miss the abundant life, then we've missed the point altogether, haven't we? Do you realize that even if the worst happens, policy-wise and law-wise and freedom-wise, that we don't lose the abundant life. In fact, God can use those circumstances to demonstrate the abundant life He's given to us even more, because it's a contrast. It's a contrast to the fallen world. Now, I think there's a place for us to lovingly fight for what is right and true and just and in harmony with our Constitution and our founding and everything else. But even that, we better not let the fight take our abundant life away from us. If you are gaining a sense that things are so out of control that not even God can help us, then you're on the wrong path. You're losing the abundant life. If you have this abundant life, then you have a perspective that you can do something about it. And the first thing you can do about it is to live that life and to share it with others. We've got something that's not widely available in this world. It's available to everybody, but not everybody gets it or thinks they want it. And so we better live it and find it and let it flow out of us so that we can bring others to Jesus. Sometimes we get stuck. We get stuck, stuck by the nightmares of our past. Things that, maybe some things we've done that were our choice, but even more than that, things that were done to us. Unfairness and pain and harm that was done to us. And we get stuck, and it blocks that abundant life. Jesus says, I'm your safe room. I'm your panic room. You need to come through that door, and when you're in there, you deserve and you should have a sense of absolute safety. He said, I am the good shepherd that will not let the wild animals attack you. I am the safe place. So let the good shepherd help you. But you have to trust him. You have to listen to his voice, because there are so many voices out there. Make sure you're hearing his voice. And I'll say this again, the only way you're going to recognize his voice is if you get really familiar with him. I guess it's a red letter thing, isn't it, to hear his voice? Some Bibles, they put the words of Jesus in red letters. I haven't always thought that was a great thing, because it's humans that decided which things he actually was saying, and but you get the concept. First of all, we need to listen to what he actually says. Doesn't that make a difference if people would just listen to what Jesus actually says? And then you hear his voice, and you recognize that voice, and when other voices come, you don't give them as much authority, not as much credence. But his voice you do. And in those moments of testing, in those moments of discouragement, you hear his voice echo, because you recognize that voice, and it gets you through them. He's the safe room. The tornado's blowing by, and you with your family are huddled in the root cellar, the storm cellar. And you know that even if the house is gone, those who are most important to you are going to be fine, because they're right there in the safe place. And the burglars may have broken in, and they're taking your valuables, and maybe they're going to take your lives if they can, but you're behind that steel door, and you're in the safe place. So don't let the thieves and the liars determine the course of your life. Don't let them frighten you, because Jesus provides a safe place. He's the good shepherd.